resource for the people of Africa, for Ambazonians. And we want to also send a message to the United Kingdom and the Jewel Africa that any investment within Ambazonia must get the consent of our people. The Menchum Fall is a natural reserve for the Ambazonian people, and we will not accept or tolerate a foreign occupying power to engage in any agreement over resources within our territory. These two companies, the New Age and the Jewel Africa, must immediately cease any discussion with Cameroon over resources within the territory of Ambazonia. We will launch an international campaign to name and shame any industry, any company, any country that validates any investment within Ambazonia by negotiating such investment with Cameroon. Ambazonians must know that we have massive reserve of natural resources that, if properly exploited, will change, the lives of our people. What is in Rio de Rey alone will provide for the entire Ambazonian household $120,000 or over 60 million amber to every household. Only the oil reserve in Rio de Rey. We have not talked about Tali. We have not talked about other areas around the Bakassi Peninsula. Only Rio de Rey will provide for each Ambazonian of the 8 million Ambazonia $15,000 to $16,000, and for each Ambazonian household of 5 persons, $125,000 per household. That is an amount of money that could provide for Ambazonians a free educational system, a free healthcare system, and is still able to take care of the unemployed and the sick. And these are resources that have been wasted in corruption between multinational companies and the corrupt occupying regime in Ambazonia. And so this is very critical for us going forward, that Ambazonians, political freedom without economic freedom is useless. The reason why African countries today are still dependencies to the Britain's Wood institutions like the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, highly indebted to countries, is because we clamored for political freedom without looking at the importance of economic independence. We will need to have the possibilities to engineer, respect for economic, social, and cultural rights, protection of our environment, protection of our people, ensuring that our economic ideologies are a reflection of our socio-economic and political realities. And so we will work seriously and campaign vigorously to ensure that the resources of Ambazonia, whether they are natural or human resources, are harnessed and exploited in a way that benefit our people and other free people across the globe. The other day I had an important meeting with the Coalition for Dialogue and Negotiation. I met with their steering committee. It was a very, very useful meeting. It was a meeting of the mind, and it made us to come to a better understanding of the various roles that we play. And I applaud them for the wonderful work that they have been doing to push international diplomacy, and they should continue on that footing. We will work together as a people. It's a promise I have made. I know sometimes we always highlight the differences and not what make us to push together as a people. I came out from that meeting extremely very excited about what is going on. You can be rest assured that things are going on extremely very well, being powered by dedicated and committed individuals. And I really want to thank the members of the steering committee and the entire coalition for their work for the Ambazonian people, and they should maintain that steadfastness and a high sense of commitment and objectivity in the way they conduct themselves The support of the Ambazonian Governing Council in collaborating on different issues is really assured, and we will make sure that we can pull together our human resources to make an impact as we push forward our international diplomacy to isolate, punish, and expose Cameroon. Every activity counts. The bravery of our sister in Australia highlighted our struggle. That is a reflection of what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989, where a lone warrior stood in front of armor personnel carriers to stop them and to demand freedom. Every activity that we engage in, whether individually or collectively, to push forward the day that Cameroon exit our homeland is greatly appreciated, and it counts, and we must continue on that footing. There are a lot of things going on, and today, let me, after exploring the international, there are a lot of international things going on within the Ambazonian Governing Council and within our war of liberation. They are positive, but as I have said repeatedly, the international system is unpredictable. It's highly unpredictable. They work on the basis of interest. Your pain and suffering is secondary to their political and economic calculations. And we must always depend on ourselves. Though we are fighting to liberate our homeland and to join the international system, we must count on our own investment in our liberation, but continuously work like we are doing collectively and individually at the international level to prepare our place within the international system to be accepted as a recognized and independent state, to be treated with respect, and treating our people with dignity. Before I came in here, I was reading a piece from one of our comrades, and who drew my attention to something which I have responded to him, but I would like to talk about that before I move into some domestic issues. He drew my attention to the fact that there is a lot of confusion whether we are fighting for restoration, it's a war of independence, a war of liberation, or restoration. He concluded that he thinks it's a war of restoration, and I attempted to clarify why it's not a war of restoration. It is not also a war of independence, but I think it's a war of liberation, and this is the reason. An act of restoration is not conducted only by war. What Gorgie did was an act of restoration. When I think in 1984, Cameroon basically renamed itself, La République du Cameroon, and Gorgie declared the restoration of the statehood of Southern Cameroons and named it Ambazonia. The period between 1961 and 1984 could be seen as a period in waiting that maybe Cameroon, the international system, will get up one morning and realize there is the necessity to implement the premise of UN General Assembly Resolution 1608. And when Cameroon took the brutal step to rename itself the Republic of Cameroon, Gorgie Dinka restored the independence of Ambazonia because it had been held in abeyance to forming a federation with Cameroon. And that act of restoration has been affected. What late Justice Alobode Ebong did on 30th of December 1999 and what Seseko did on the 1st of October 2007 was no longer restoration, was asserting the restoration that was effected by Gorgie Dinka. We have restored our independence by the act of restoration done by Gorgie Dinka in 1984. But Ambazonia is still physically occupied. So what we are engaged in is a war of liberation. And that's exactly what I put forward to our comrade. There should be no ambiguity. It is not about who is right. It's not about, this is how to frame your liberation struggle so that people out there can understand. Because, and I agree with him, an act of independence, a war of independence might be defined either as an act of secession or an act of separation. And we have always and rightfully argued that Amazonia had been independent, and it's now physically occupied, and what we are engaged in is a liberation war to free ourselves from the last vestiges of Cameroon's presence in our homeland. Now I want to talk about a couple of issues. When we started, the armed resistance, we wanted to remove from our territory colonial outposts, whether they're gendarmeries or DO's offices, all colonial vestiges within our country. Those vestiges had been the source of authority, the source of governance within Amazonia. And in the act of removing these institutions, we had the choice of creating alternative ground institutions or leaving those spaces. We decided not to create, alternative governance structures for strategic reasons. The moment you create such governance structures, they become different alternative centers of power that can be exploited by the international system or La Republique. Just imagine that when we liberated a place, we set up an alternative governance structure. During time of discussions, they might bypass our defense forces to negotiate with corrupt individuals that we might have appointed at the time when we thought they were patriotic. And they will begin discussions with them as legitimate representatives of our people. It will also change our perspective of the liberation campaign from that of active liberation to that of governance. Secondly, when you create alternative political institutions to replace the ones you've removed, you begin to bear the cost of governance. With the little resources we have, we cannot split the resources between liberation and that of governance. So once we remove Cameroon institutions, we knew definitely that Cameroon will still continue to insist on its legitimacy by claiming the presence of those institutions, even if they are not physically present. They will continue to pay the workers that work within those institutions. In doing so, we achieve a strategic objective of our liberation strategy, increasing the cost of the occupation. So we decided not to create alternative governance institutions to fill the ungovernable spaces created by the demise of Cameroon. But that has created another problem. Those ungovernable spaces are sometimes now being filled by bad actors, extortionists, some deliberately implanted by La Republique, some exploited by criminals within our liberation war, to extort our people. And that's what we now know as the kidnapping for ransom or extortion. This is problematic, and I've talked about this severally. We cannot, and I repeat, we cannot fight against an occupying system that extorted, that murdered our people, that arrested our people without warrant, detained them incommunicado, subjected them to torture. We cannot act in certain circumstances like the same occupier we are fighting against. We will not, and I say this in a very firm and stern language, we will not tolerate individuals who exploit our war of liberation to kidnap our people, extort our population, harass our population. You will not exploit the war for our freedom for your own selfish personal gain. That is why we are declaring war on kidnappers and extortionists. And today I am announcing an individual, Capo Daniel, whom you know as the czar, who is going to oversee the effort to make sure that we can stop all those anti-liberation individuals who have infiltrated our war of liberation for their personal agenda. Our population must be assured that they will live in safety, they will not be harassed on the one hand by elements of the occupying regime and infiltrators within our war of independence, acting under loose defense formations without command and control. I'm also announcing principal commander on the ground, Commander Pastor, is going to be responsible within the state of Mezam, because there are two areas we've identified. Mezam is the most important state in our war of liberation, but it is a state also where there is a lot of harassment. Two particular areas within Mezam, within the Mankon area and within Bafut. Let these two areas understand that we will not allow these areas to be areas of shame, where individuals reside, hide, kidnap, extort, and retreat. Capo Daniel, any Amazonian, we are going to put up a number, a telephone number, a WhatsApp number, that you can report any act of kidnapping, any act of extortion immediately to Comrade Capo Daniel. It will be communicated to the lead commander of the operations on the ground against kidnapping and extortionists, to make sure that we can get these people out of our war of independence. We will also name and shame them. Any commander from whose area kidnappers and extortionists harass our population, we will expose you, will name you, will declare you incompetent. As a commander, you must have command and control within your area. And your primary responsibility, the primary responsibility of any commander, is to safeguard the interests of the people within their area of control, and to fight the occupying power and deny them access to our population. And if you fail in that responsibility, you are inept and incapable of exercising command and control within your area of jurisdiction. So I want to assure our population that we will not tolerate the harassment of our population by any individual. We also frown at commanders or soldiers who set up roadblocks. Yes, you have a right to set up roadblocks. Roadblocks are set up to make sure that we can stop infiltrators like Republic agents, their spies and their black leg, and to stop La Republic secretly moving materials into areas that we control. You cannot, it's not allowed to set up roadblocks and harass passengers who are making a mega living under the situation of occupation, and be collecting monies from them. You're doing the same that the enemy has been doing for the past 60 years, and this is unacceptable. Any unit that sets up a roadblock, we will know. And if your roadblock does not meet the minimum threshold for the safety of our people, to stop La Republic infiltrating blacklegs and spies and to moving materials into secure zones, we are going to send a rapid reaction force of the stabilization force to dismantle that particular roadblock. And so our soldiers must be very clear. Yesterday we also sent a message to the coordinators of the Alliance Française within the city of Bamenda to evacuate the territory in the next 48 hours. And as we said, the order to evacuate is not some anti-French sentiment. No, we are not engaged in some pariah anti-French activity. We are engaged in the liberation of our homeland, and we have noted that the activities of the Alliance Française are inconsistent with the objective that we fight for, and we have communicated in strong terms, giving them 48 hours to evacuate from the city of Bamenda. At the appropriate time, we will determine whether they are able to come back into our territory. In the past few months also, we have removed the fund of Inyo. His activities have been also inconsistent with our liberation objective, and so the fund of Inyo in the great state of Momo has been dethroned. All the traditional artifacts are being safely protected, and the kingmakers are duly informed, and we're working with them to ensure that there is an orderly transition at this particular moment. Let me also be very clear to Nigeria that your consulate within our territory has not been approved by the Amazonian leadership, and it's important that Nigeria seeks the consent of Amazonia in having its consulate within Oya. Now, let me say the following. The concept of statehood within the continent shall never again be predicated on violence, extortion, arbitrary actions, and acts of violence against the people. We will alter the perception of statehood within the continent of Africa. For the past 60 years, and Amazonians we have to take this seriously. We've made some mistakes in this liberation war. You know, we assign the tag of heroes anyhow. Anybody who speaks against the French is our hero. Anybody who speaks against the British is our hero. Remember, the heroes of the early 60s, the heroes who fought for independence, denied multi-partism in the name of bringing together our various nations and communities, you know, for our independence, for political stability, and against the enemy which they saw as white colonialists from a far distance. We accepted authoritarianism, one-party state system in the name of internal cohesion against enemies whom we had identified as being far away. What did we get in return? Autocracies that were entrenched for 60 years. Entrenched for 60 years. Consequences: denial of economic, social and cultural rights, civil and political rights, denial of opportunities, politics of violence, governance without consent. Africa will no longer tolerate even Jesus Christ, who reviews the Constitution for their own interest. The Constitution is a social contract that people have made, giving, you know, authorities to institutions and individuals to govern them based on consent. This has been overthrown for an anarchic authoritarian system, and African leaders have sat quiet as their peers have murdered, tortured, harassed, and mortgaged the entire continent. The voices of the people, the nations, the notion of pan-africanism shall no longer be defined as a stitching together of states against external enemies beyond our own shores. The notion of pan-africanism must be redefined as the acceptance of external self-determination of nations that achieve true political and economic independence and accept to form political unions with others for economic prosperity, to secure the rights and privileges of our people, and to defend our continent against external encroachment without our consent. And that's why it's important that any state, as I've said about the British and their companies that deal with Cameroon on resources within Amazonia without our consent, is going to be unacceptable. And so too we send this message to Nigeria. Your consulate within our country is illegal, and if you want it to continuously stay in there, there must be discussed with our population. My fellow Amazonians, the past of few weeks has been wonderful in terms of our armed resistance against the enemy. Remember, we started with DIN guns. We also started with IEDs. The early years of our liberation, we started with IEDs. And then DIN guns, automatic rifles, and then we asked you people to contribute monies for RPGs. I know sometimes people have been asking why are they not being used that often. Sometimes finding the heads is very difficult. And we have moved back again into using IEDs. I explained this in last year, why we need to engage in IEDs. That was at the peak of the massacres. And I said we needed these explosive devices to be able to impede and slow the movement of Cameroon forces into our isolated neighborhoods where they commit acts of massacres and genocide. And I call upon you to invest in these armories that will give us, you know, an expanded outreach in terms of the kinds of activities. I'm always very glad that once we initiate these processes, the block by block approach takes effect immediately, that all units across the territory see it as effective and they move forward, you know, to begin to strengthen themselves. What you've been seeing in the past a few weeks or since January is the tip of the iceberg. More is coming, and as I said before, there will be no hiding place for the enemy. Armor cars will no longer be secure. Helicopters is not a place you can hide. There will be no space within Ambazonia wherein the enemy can take refuge. And so I congratulate our forces on the ground for their extensive campaign to rip La Republique to shreds and to expose them in their hiding spaces and send them back to their country in body bags. We call on families within Cameroon to get their kids out of our homeland, because you want your kid alive than dying within the context of an illegal war. And I think we must make more investment. I said the other week, the investment we have made thus far has been for defensive purposes. It's to make sure that we hold our position, that we cannot be pushed out, even though we have lost grounds because of the activities of some Ambazonians, instituting tribalism and undermining the effort of fighters who liberated different territories. You must understand that the strategy of our liberation is a core peripheral kind of campaign. The cores are stable, but the peripheries will keep changing. Sometimes they are weak, sometimes they become strong. But we are always reviewing the strategy and making sure that we can strengthen our peripheries so that they can protect the core. It's very critical that we make the kinds of investment that will keep Ambazonia on the offensive. There are times when you watch different operations on the ground and then there is a dip. You ask yourself, why are there no actions? It's because if we make an investment of $30,000, you expect soldiers, to fight maybe for 1 week. Because as I said, an AK-47 maybe carries with double magazine a couple of hundreds of seats. An AK-47 can fire 600 bullets in 1 minute. 1,000 bullets is $3,000. And so if you can fire 600 in 1 minute, so you exhaust $3,000 in less than 2 minutes. That's how expensive freedom is. And I appeal to each and every one of you not to relent, not to define the Ambazonian liberation war on the moments of your lows or on the moments of some external negative campaigns being propagated by disgruntled individuals. Define the liberation war based on what we promise to achieve, making the territory ungovernable, internationalizing our struggle, making foreign ministers like the U.S. Secretary of State being able to talk about it, making parliaments debate about it. That's how you should define it. Being able to cause Cameroon to create Commission A, Commission B, Special Status A, national dialogue, international dialogue, confusing them. That's what, the so-called 2 cubes of sugar have been able to achieve in less than 4 years without any external support from any country, without training of our forces by any country. Mandela was trained in Libya. South African fighters were trained in Cuba. No one has ever trained us. We've been able to train ourselves, equip ourselves. And as we've become primary investors in our own liberation, we can be assured of economic independence, added to political independence. It makes Ambazonia the place everyone want to go to. So I ask each and every one of you to continuously commit. This is a turning point year. I will not talk much about it, but we are at work. The stabilization force is a projection of hope. We can carry out little actions here and little actions there. It's like a spark. Those are just sparks. What maintains the hope for our country to be free is the stabilization force. It's not a joke. In the coming week, the War Council will be unveiling something strategic. In the coming week, something strategic which has been factored in the stabilization force. Training is ongoing in different places to make sure we can secure territory, defend it, protect the people within, establish institutions like educational institutions, health institutions, and other institutions that make a nation viable. We cannot simply rely on the sparks. The sparks are meant to undermine the ability of the enemy to function, to undermine the ability of the enemy to claim, control of our territory. But we must secure and we must defend. And that's why on a monthly basis, we are out there mobilizing funds to equip, train, and make sure that we can take whole and secure. And we will continue to do that on a constant basis. Remember, now we're talking about machine guns. It's very critical you understand the transformation and why sometimes we move from one sort of rifles to the next, because it's factored in the National Liberation, Consolidation and Stabilization Plan. We need more heavy caliber rifles, and machine guns is critical. And I'm also glad that each time we introduce these things in the territory, there are independent forces that are able to move quickly to be able to get this. Like our brigade in Alabcam was able to secure one from Gokitungia for no pity. We thank him for some of the things that they have been doing, and we look forward that though there are questions surrounding a couple of things on the ground, we will investigating all of them, and we will be able to speak with clarity about what is going on. But I want to assure each and every one of you that under my leadership, there will be clarity and there will be certainty. Where we falter, whether in diplomacy or in defense, you will know, because you are the custodian of our independence. Under my leadership, there will be certainty and a notion of stability. Character defines leadership. There will be honesty in this leadership. There will be transparency. Every investment you make will be used for the requisite issues that were advanced for that investment. And so far you have been able to measure the things that we have done, the impact they have had on the occupation. And I know in your times of confusion and in your times of sadness, there is hope that you will have a country that is truly independent politically and economically. That the nomads that are scattered across the globe, the Amazonians who are everywhere, feeling this nostalgia to return home, will have the opportunity to come back home as entrepreneurs, opportunity creators, and to build the kind and support the kinds of systems that we will all build. I have said repeatedly, we will win as a people. I thank our comrades in Stockholm. I met them yesterday, and I'm grateful for their support that they've given to the ADF and other forces. I'm grateful that they have an open mind perspective, willing to listen. Those are the kinds of persons that bridge the gap between others. We will win as a people. There are times of rancor, and they are not defining in the way that we conduct ourselves. During the period of transition, we will be able to come together and establish the framework for transition, and that will be the basis for governance. As my comrade wrote to me yesterday, we should not be calling for negotiations. We should not be calling for dialogue. When a thief breaks into your home, you man up, you woman up, smash the door, get them out of your home, and claim ownership. We should be dedicated to the liberation of our country through armed resistance and any other method consistent with international rule, and to be focused on liberation. When the time will come, the enemy will talk tail, walk over, surrender, negotiate the terms of their exit, and pay reparation for 60 years of thuggery and killings. Once more, courage to our prisoners of war, courage to our forces across the entire territory, and to all of our people across the globe, without whose effort we will not be here today. To our friends, those who stood by us, stood for us, spoke for us, battled for us, we will never forget. As Mandela once said, we will not only be thinking about, the actions of our enemies, but also the silence of our friends. God bless you all. Have a blessed day.
Hail this land of glory, we the Amazonian, special loyalty. Praises to our Savior who granted us our freedom, and levels to the hero who called the lonely gather. Glory to glory, we rise and never to fall. Yeah, in a nation.